Normal is relative. When my sister was in second grade, she was diagnosed with ADHD and a written language learning disorder. This disorder essentially affects her ability to read, write, and interpret letters. In fact, her handwriting often looks like this, where her letters are backward. Shortly after her diagnosis, she began receiving special education services at school. This looked a lot like being pulled from class and taking tests with help in a special location. And despite her clear intelligence and her advancing in her academics, she started having feelings of resentment and inadequacy, asking herself, "What is wrong with me?" When she started high school, she asked to no longer receive her services, and when she transitioned to college, she became so overwhelmed, behind in her work, that she was placed on an academic dismissal. At that time, as her sister, I was devastated to see her hurting and to see a lack in confidence and all of the wonderful and smart characteristics that I see in her. And although this is just one small, specific experience with special education, it made me ask, how do we meet our students' needs and ensure their long-term success? The Ohio Department of Education reports that 16% of all school-age children in the state of Ohio are identified to have a disability or are eligible for special education. 16% equals to 273,589 students with disabilities in the state of Ohio. And for every one of those eligible students, they can go through a process which is designed to help identify areas of need and then provide the appropriate services. But as those needs and weaknesses are identified, this can center the process on what a student is not capable of, or a deficit-based approach. But when you look at any individual to find their weaknesses, you can also find their strengths. Depending on the child's circumstances, they are likely to go through this evaluation process, which includes a number of assessments, observations, communications with caregivers and teachers. And all of this information is ultimately used to help set goals for the student and detail a document called an Individualized Education Program, or IEP. It is important to note that the assessments that are typically used during this process are vitally important as they help provide insight on where the student struggles. However, results can often look like this. Your child is clinically significant, extremely low in, struggles to, has weaknesses in. These assessments are designed to compare one student against the normal sample. And this can be really hard for parents when they come to their first meeting and they're handed a document that narrates their child in this way. But one way we can prioritize student strengths is by utilizing strengths-based assessments during the process to provide further insight in where the student does well. Using strengths-based assessments allow the team to create a plan that focuses on what the student is capable of. An article out of the University of California asserts that focusing on student strengths fosters motivation and confidence within the student and within their ability. This can help us make goals that don't just change a surface level behavior, but instead address an underlying problem. Michael Epstein is a creator of one of those strengths-based assessments called the Behavior and Emotional Rating Scale. He puts it like this: when IEPs are focused on strengths rather than deficits and pathologies, children and families are more likely to become involved in the education process and use those strengths and resources to achieve the stated goal. Within any special education team, you're likely to find caregivers, advocates, teachers, school psychologists, administrators, and many other related school staff. And when that team comes together, it is imperative that they are working collaboratively with the parents to review the stated goals and the desires for the child's educational experience, as indicated by federal law. Brent Elder of Rowan University and his colleagues describe positive collaboration as collaboration that includes a holistic view of the child and one that develops meaningful relationships between the parents and the school staff. Using positive collaboration allows us to see the child in all areas of their life, instead of just the areas in which they struggle at school. And in order to maintain those meaningful relationships, we can prioritize our word choice by incorporating student strengths into our discussions with the family. In one study out of the Behavioral Disorders Journal, they sought to examine positive parental engagement within the context of special education. Some of the parents involved in that study highlighted a few areas that needed improvement. The first was a need for a greater emphasis on the students' strengths during the meetings, and the second was a need for greater collaboration when creating the students' goals. There are many times, unfortunately, that parents come to the meeting where documents and goals have already been defined, with little or no collaboration with the parents. In that same study, the parents who reported feeling they were given adequate time to provide their insight on their child said they were better able to collaborate on the goals, and in turn, better able to understand their students' goals. Positive collaboration increases family buy-in into the special education process. The goal of special education in its entirety and by federal law is to ensure that students have the supports and services that allow them to adequately access their education. Adequate access to education is a core civil right for all students and families in the United States. By reframing our context to prioritize student strengths, we can better produce goals and interventions that are sustainable for the child by hinging on what they're good at to help in areas where they struggle. This can also help promote their self-efficacy or their belief in their own ability. I am hopeful as we push towards ensuring our students' success that we can shift a narrative from one that says students can't to students can. Having a disability does not mean inability. Having needs does not mean special. And where there are weaknesses, so there are strengths, and normal is relative. Thank you.